The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, a brief evolutionary introduction and free market solution. By Jorge Baceda. When a lion takes over a pride and kills the cubs so that the females will once again be ready to mate, we don't say that the lion is evil, we rightly understand the complex evolutionary factors leading to such actions. It is likewise important to look at our socio-economic problems like the current Israeli, Zionist/Palestinian conflict using an evolutionary lens that is free of blame and full of sympathy and understanding. From a simple evolutionary perspective, there is nobody to blame for this mess. We should neither blame the slightly smarter apes who have grown up and absorbed a Jewish identity, even the racist to the core hyper-religious tribalistic settlers, nor the fellow slightly smarter apes that have absorbed a Palestinian identity, even the ones who go on stabbing sprees and mistakenly believe Jews are some sinister plotters/controllers/etc. We should blame neither Hitler for his clueless anti-Semitism and racist pseudoscience, classic examples being of course. Don't think you can fight racial tuberculosis without taking care to rid the nation of the carrier of that racial tuberculosis. This Jewish contamination will not subside, this poisoning of the nation will not end, until the carrier himself, the Jew, has been banished from our midst. Nor Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, founder and spiritual leader of the largest religious political party in Israel, Shas, which won 11 of 120 Knesset seats in the 2009 elections, and is also a former Sephardi chief rabbi of Israel, which can be seen as the sort of pope of the Sephardic Jews, who said in a sermon on October 16, 2010 that Goyim non-Jews were born only to serve us. Without that, they have no place in the world only to serve the people of Israel. Why are Gentiles needed? They will work, they will plow, they will reap. We will sit like an effendi and eat. That is why Gentiles were created. Nor the great Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin, who said, from a Jewish perspective there is not one German who is not a Nazi, and there is not one German who is not a murderer. These are fellow slightly smarter apes who were once little kids curious about the world. One has to look at the ideas and environment that cause such potentially dangerous/misguided/hopeful personalities/statements instead of reverting to simplistic identity politics and good vs evil. I consider Zionism and the creation of the modern state of Israel to be a very understandable intellectual error. An error made not by Jews, but by Europeans/mankind in general. Had there been no anti-Semitism/Jew-Gentile conflicts in Western civilization, Zionism and resulting ongoing disastrous ramifications simply would not have occurred. Let us very briefly try to see the history of this mess from a sort of evolutionary perspective. By the late 1800s, as reason was replacing religious mysticism/squabbles, things were quickly improving for all Europeans and especially Jews. Man was supposed to be free to live his life as he chose instead of constrained by the rule of kings/church/theocracy and have the right to keep/control his private property. From such freedom and respect for private property emerged the freedom to trade with anyone in the entire planet, which inadvertently began to transform increasingly free people into a global supercomputer where all people/companies are motivated to innovate and learn from each other, thus inadvertently cooperate to discover and spread superior information with which to serve customers and reorder all of mankind. Companies that don't successfully compete, innovate and learn/copy, won't get enough revenue to pay a competitive wage, motivating employees to once again use their freedom to trade, this time their labor, to quit and join the increasingly better informed and thus more productive and thus higher paying companies. Just like in the Olympics we can discover the best athletes in the world due to global competition, so does free trade among all nations allows the best ideas to compete and spread globally. It is our freedom as customers to buy a Honda made in Japan that has cool feature X, which then motivates BMW, Ford, etc. to compete/copy feature X. Since morals and identities are simply ways of acting/information, they are knowledge which also emerges and spreads via economic competition. Companies/orders that hire/nourish/trade with lazy, disrespectful, or corrupt people will be less competitive and be inevitably pressured/selected to hire people with better morals, which in turn forces everyone to be respectful and hardworking regardless of race, sex, etc. Similarly, it is hard-working, tolerant, courteous people who thanks to competition inevitably force everyone else to be likewise. As 1974 Nobel laureate in economics F. A. Hayek tells us, competition is, after all, always a process in which a small number makes it necessary for larger numbers to do what they do not like, be it to work harder, to change habits, or to devote a degree of attention, continuous application, or regularity to their work which without competition would not be needed. As millions of Italians, Britons, Germans, Jews, and others from all over the world came to America, it was ultimately the competition which grows from private property and thus individual liberty/freedom which stripped these people of their otherwise nationalistic/ethnocentric/tribalistic identities and evolved what came to be seen as the classic American character/ethos of wanting to be seen as a reputable/honest businessman/professional who treats everyone with respect and wears a business suit as opposed to older religious/ethnocentric dress. So not only does private property turn on or leads to economic competition and other aspects of the market economy and resulting social order/civilization, it also evolves our culture/identity to be ideally suited for participation in it. The emergence of international finance/banking greatly accelerated progress. Besides the more obvious function of safeguarding savings and pooling the savings/wealth of many people to allow the execution of bigger projects which would have been impossible if entrepreneurs were limited to the few savings/wealth of friends and family, banking/finance and more specifically the phenomenon of interest rates also play a nearly miraculous role. If we assume that the general interest rate is at 5%, we can divide minds/CPUs into two categories. 1. Those that have relatively inferior knowledge or business plans that can grow the economic pie by less than 5% and will be motivated to refrain from consumption/spending by lending their savings/money to banks to earn the 5% interest and thus increasing the amount of saved/unconsumed wealth, and 2. Those minds that have superior knowledge or business plans which will be motivated to become borrowers/consumers of the previously saved/unconsumed funds/wealth so they can consume/spend it as they execute the business plans they expect to yield a higher than 5% return on investment so that they can pay back the loans with interest and keep the rest as profit. As if by magic, finance/banking/interest rates motivate the accumulation of wealth and its pairing with minds/CPUs that have superior ideas, thus giving a tremendous sort of computational boost to society. The savings of the much vilified rich, thanks to finance/banking, is the very wealth that private sector workers consume while they go about increasing production by an amount greater than the current interest rate. Taxing the rich/middle class/anyone just removes this wealth and the efficient/productive/profitable/private sector jobs it would otherwise sustain. We should quickly emphasize that the production of wealth requires the consumption of wealth. For example, if 1,000 men are to spend 2 years producing a skyscraper, they must consume/use the bricks/materials/energy/transportation/wealth that they, as well as their dependents/family, need while they produce the skyscraper. And simply creating money does not create such wealth. Governments via their central banks creating money just means that there is now more money per existing unit of wealth, thus higher prices, and gives the illusion that there are enough bricks/wealth to build say 10 skyscrapers when in reality there was only enough wealth to build 8. Unfortunately, since wealth was squandered building the bases for 10, only 6 instead of 8 could actually be finished. This money creation, inflation, or fake saved wealth by governments and their central banks is what causes the booms and busts in economies. Mises sums up everything beautifully when he wrote, "Credit expansion cannot increase the supply of real goods. It merely brings about a rearrangement. It diverts capital investment away from the course prescribed by the state of economic wealth and market conditions. It causes production to pursue paths which it would not follow unless the economy were to acquire an increase in material goods. As a result, the upswing lacks a solid base. It is not real prosperity. It is illusory prosperity. It did not develop from an increase in economic wealth. Rather, it arose because the credit expansion created the illusion of such an increase. Sooner or later it must become apparent that this economic situation is built on sand. It may seem hard to believe, but John Maynard Keynes, the economist whose theories underpin mainstream economics, believed that creating savings by adding money to banks, inflation, are just as genuine as any other savings, like those created by first producing real wealth and then consuming less, thus saving/leaving real wealth. Keynes also believed that activity of one kind or another is the only possible means of making the wheels of economic progress and of the production of wealth go round again, which is absurd because activity has to be coordinated in a manner that leads to more production than consumption, otherwise you are just shrinking the economic pie. This also helps us easily understand how war and military spending is horrendous for society, as you have millions of people consuming useful wealth like food/housing/energy as they produce push-ups, tanks, bullets, which are then used to destroy more wealth/life, leading to an obvious shrinking of wealth/life/order, even though they are all working and thus engaged in activity of one kind or another. It is useful to envision the socio-economic order as it really exists, as if looked at from high above. Envision people coming together/apart as companies/orders emerge and dissolve in ever-changing conditions. Superior information arising and rippling/restructuring the social order thanks to competition. As orders get more productive, they lure other people to trade with/join them by offering more money/wealth for their labor relative to other companies/orders, eventually causing the least productive orders to sort of dissolve as their factors of production like labor, buildings, etc. are bid away to be parts of more productive plans/orders. A sort of swarm intelligence emerges as the all-pervasive public quickly nourishes the growth and spread or superior orders/companies/information, inadvertently expanding the worldwide division of labor and information as entire neighborhoods/cities morph themselves in specialized ways as complementary pieces of information/orders segregate themselves in distinct geographical locations, like the software industry in Silicon Valley, California, and manufacturing in Guangdong, southern China. Thus the rapid increase in individual liberty that occurred in the 1800s inadvertently gave birth to global free market capitalism and the skyrocketing prosperity that has transformed/reordered mankind since. By not seeking converts and thus always remaining a minority among the larger Christianity and Islam, and easily losing their land from time to time among other factors, Jewish culture/identity was shaped/evolved/selected to be more commercial and thus capitalist, and eventually hated by the economically ignorant masses/socialists like Hitler, obviously. Historian Paul Johnson gives the classic example. The Jews reacted by engaging in the one business where Christian laws actually discriminated in their favor, and so became identified with the hated trade of money lending. Rabbi Joseph Colin, who knew both France and Italy in the second half of the 15th century, wrote that the Jews of both countries hardly engaged in any other profession. Johnson, Paul. 1988, A History of the Jews. p. 174. Hitler, being an economically clueless National Socialist, Nazi, believed that a coercive competitionless bureaucracy of experts, government, would work better than free people/capitalism. He had zero clue how the economic freedom that emerges from private property led to economic competition and the rapid/efficient creation and spread of information and superior morals/culture. He was also understandably clueless regarding the great benefits of banking/finance and stock markets, and understandingly saw the overrepresentation of Jews in those industries as some kind of sinister plot, as can easily be seen in numerous excerpts like this one from a speech given in Munich on July 28, 1922. The vast process of the industrialization of the peoples meant the confluence of great masses of workmen in the towns. Parallel with this was a gradual moneyfication of the whole of the nation's labor strength. Share capital was in the ascendant, and thus bit by bit the stock exchange came to control the whole national economy. The directors of these institutions were, and are without exception, Jews. I say without exception, for the few non-Jews who had a share in them are in the last resort nothing but screens, shop window Christians, whom one needs in order, for the sake of the masses, to keep up the appearance that these institutions were after all founded as a natural outcome of the needs and the economic life of all peoples alike, and were not, as was the fact, institutions which correspond only with the essential characteristics of the Jewish people and are the outcome of those characteristics. Hitler. Similarly, factors like socialism/communism's atheism, which would rid Jews of the religious persecution, its alluring scientific aura, and need for the better educated, which Jews were, to lead the central planning apparatus, inadvertently caused Jews to be more attracted to socialism/communism and thus be leaders in both socialism and capitalism. They obviously did not invent or plot socialism/communism/capitalism like Hitler and naive thinkers to this day claim. It could be said that Jews were naturally selected to be both socialist and capitalist/finance leaders, thus giving the impression that they were its creators/plotters. Theodor Herzl, the founder of political Zionism, nicely summarizes the recent evolution of Jewish culture and socialism and capitalism. We are what the ghetto made us. We have attained preeminence in finance, because medieval conditions drove us to it. The same process is now being repeated. We are again being forced into finance, now it is the stock exchange, by being kept out of other branches of economic activity. Being on the stock exchange, we are consequently exposed afresh to contempt. At the same time, we continue to produce an abundance of mediocre intellects who find no outlet, and this endangers our social position as much as does our increasing wealth. Educated Jews without means are now rapidly becoming socialists. Hence we are certain to suffer very severely in the struggle between classes, because we stand in the most exposed position in the camps of both socialists and capitalists. The point of the above is that we must deconstruct hate/evil/disasters into economic ignorance/fallacies. The rise of global free trade and capitalism was great, however, as the church and its monarchical rulers were being replaced by nationalist/tribalistic representative governments, which would eventually lead to WWI, the idea of Jewish nationalism/Zionism understandably also emerged. Since Jews tend to be an extended blood-related family that has been an oftentimes persecuted minority due to religious/tribalistic squabbles of antiquity/etc., the sense of identity and ethnocentrism is understandably stronger and has been an important albeit unfortunate factor in both anti-Semitism and Zionism. Both anti-Semitism and Zionism are rooted in the same intellectual error, that the slightly smarter apes who identify as Jews are so different from the other slightly smarter apes that they must leave the real thousands of towns and synagogues where for hundreds of years they were an integral part of Western civilization to create a country based on religious mythology in an area already populated by others who had a different identity, Muslims, Christians, and fellow anti-Zionist Jews, and for numerous understandable reasons were adamantly opposed to living under such a theocratic/ethnocentric Jewish state. Theodor Herzl highlighted this ideological congruence of both Zionists and anti-Semites in his foundational book The Jewish State, 1896. The anti-Semites will be our most steadfast friends. The anti-Semitic countries will be our allies. Great exertions will hardly be necessary to spur on the movement. Anti-Semites provide the requisite impetus. They need only do what they did before, and then they will create a desire to emigrate where it did not previously exist, and strengthen it where it existed before. During the early days of Zionism, many Jews were divided into the Zionists and anti-Zionists, assimilationists. Chaim Weizmann, the leading Zionist figure after Herzl's death in 1904, lamented how assimilated Jews were dead against Zionism and identified Zionism, correctly IMHO, as a primitive tribalism. For assimilated Jews, they looked upon it as a primitive tribalism. They felt themselves called upon to rescue Judaism from Zionism. These people are dead against Zionism. Zionism is not meant for those people who have cut themselves adrift from Jewry. Of course, that rapidly increasing number of very well-educated cosmopolitan assimilated Jews spread all over Europe/USA just wanted to be fellow human beings free of ancient tribalism/mysticism/identities. Unfortunately, for very understandable reasons/factors, Hitler/etc., for which nobody is to blame and are ultimately rooted in economic ignorance and the tribalistic nature of the slightly smarter apes, like a rocket that is just about to reach orbit but runs out of fuel and comes crashing down to Earth, tribalism/Zionism would inadvertently pull Jews and all of Western civilization back to an increasingly ethnocentric identity/worldview with disastrous consequences, such as the Zionists' understandable need/desire to expel over 700,000 Palestinians and prevent them from returning home in order to create their Jewish state/Israel as the result of complex events leading to a sort of civil war in 1947-9. Israel's main architect and first Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion 10 years earlier in 1938 mentioned, "With compulsory transfer we would have a vast area for settlement. I support compulsory transfer. I don't see anything immoral in it." Morris, 1999, p. 144. On February 6, 1948, as Palestinians were being expelled to make way for the Jewish state, Ben-Gurion again: "The war will give us the land. The concepts of ours and not ours are only concepts for peacetime, and during war they lose their meaning." Ben-Gurion's War Diary, Volume 1, entry dated February 6, 1948. p. 211. In another occasion, "Transfer is what will make possible a comprehensive settlement program. Thankfully, the Arab people have vast empty areas. Jewish power, which grows steadily, will also increase our possibilities to carry out transfer on a large scale." Morris, 2004, p. 48. When the First World War ended, 1918, and the victors, British/French/US, were deciding what to do with the acquired lands, Palestine, in order to better understand the wishes of the local population regarding the possibility of creating a Jewish state in the land, the USA organized the King Crane Commission. Among their findings/recommendations were: "We recommend serious modification of the extreme Zionist program for Palestine of unlimited immigration of Jews, looking finally to making Palestine distinctly a Jewish state." The fact came out repeatedly in the Commission's conference with Jewish representatives, that the Zionists looked forward to a practically complete dispossession of the present non-Jewish inhabitants of Palestine, by various forms of purchase. It is to be remembered that the non-Jewish population of Palestine, nearly 9/10 of the whole, are emphatically against the entire Zionist program. There was no one thing upon which the population of Palestine were more agreed than upon this. To subject a people so minded to unlimited Jewish immigration, and to steady financial and social pressure to surrender the land, would be a gross violation of the principle just quoted, and of the people's rights. It is to be noted also that the feeling against the Zionist program is not confined to Palestine, but shared very generally by the people throughout Syria, as our conferences clearly showed. The peace conference should not shut its eyes to the fact that the anti-Zionist feeling in Palestine and Syria is intense and not lightly to be flouted. No British officer, consulted by the commissioners, believed that the Zionist program could be carried out except by force of arms. That of itself is evidence of a strong sense of the injustice of the Zionist program, on the part of the non-Jewish populations of Palestine and Syria. Decisions, requiring armies to carry out, are sometimes necessary, but they are surely not gratuitously to be taken in the interests of a serious injustice. For the initial claim, often submitted by Zionist representatives, that they have a right to Palestine, based on an occupation of 2,000 years ago, can hardly be seriously considered. The places which are most sacred to Christians, those having to do with Jesus and which are also sacred to Muslims, are not only not sacred to Jews, but abhorrent to them. It is simply impossible, under those circumstances, for Muslims and Christians to feel satisfied to have these places in Jewish hands, or under the custody of Jews. In fact, from this point of view, the Muslims, just because the sacred places of all three religions are sacred to them, have made very naturally much more satisfactory custodians of the holy places than the Jews could be. In view of all these considerations, and with a deep sense of sympathy for the Jewish cause, the commissioners feel bound to recommend that only a greatly reduced Zionist program be attempted by the peace conference, and even that, only very gradually initiated. This would have to mean that Jewish immigration should be definitely limited, and that the project for making Palestine distinctly a Jewish commonwealth should be given up. A group of prominent Arab Muslims and Christians sent a letter to the Paris Peace Conference, 1919, expressing their opposition to Zionism. The principles of justice and equity cannot admit of the crushing of a nation by an influx of a greater number of another foreign nation that will assimilate her. The country is ours and has been so of old. We have lived in it longer than they did, and have worked in it more than they did. Our historical and religious relations with it, we Muslims and Christians, far exceed those of the Jews. Therefore, their claim to their ancient historical rights in the country do not give them the right of appropriating it, inasmuch as in our historical rights we Arabs cannot justify our claims in Spain, our old home, where our rule and glory flourished for 8 centuries, and this gave birth to the modern civilization of Europe. Does justice then allow of the violation of the rights of the majority? But the imperialist attitude of the British/Europeans is perfectly captured by former Prime Minister Lord Balfour, who said at the time, "I am quite unable to see why heaven or any other power should object to our telling the Moslem what he ought to think." And for in Palestine we do not propose to even go through the form of consulting the wishes of the present inhabitants of the country, though the American King Crane Commission is going through the form of asking what they are. The 4 great powers, Britain, France, Italy, and the United States, are committed to Zionism. And Zionism, be it right or wrong, good or bad, is rooted in age-long traditions, in present needs, and future hopes, of far profounder import than the desires and prejudices of the 700,000 Arabs who now inhabit that ancient land. This is a 2-video playlist featuring one of the leading Israeli and Zionist historians, Benny Morris. He does a wonderful job of showing a narrative that is much more sympathetic to the Israeli/Zionist perspective. And here is another 2-video playlist with Ilan Papp showing a more critical/etc. perspective. The above helps us understand how there could never be a modern democratic country in the Middle East, because such a democracy, rightfully reflecting the wishes and sense of justice of the Islamic world/public, will always elect a critic of the Zionist error/fallacy, in its current form, and thus be seen as an anti-Semite, since so many Jews have tied their own identity to a political/historical error. It certainly does not help that the non-Jewish/Gentile world is full of naive thinkers who believe the usual Jews are malicious plotters tropes, which then understandably causes Jews to justify the continuation/expansion of the current brand of Zionism and feel like coexistence would be impossible. Again, it is a mess for which no particular individual or group is to blame. This means that, as we have been seeing for 70+ years, the USA/Israel/Europe, the white non-Muslim world where white Ashkenazi/European Jews have tremendous support/influence/sympathy, will continue to have to either support pro-Israeli status quo dictators and/or continue military conflicts/overthrows, Iraq, Libya, Syria, etc., in the area at a staggering cost in terms of U.S. massive military yearly consumption, $1.2 trillion per year, immense human suffering for the millions of people in the areas who have to either live under the dictatorships or war-torn countries. This conflict is like a knife stuck in mankind's thigh, which constantly radiates naive religious/mystical good versus evil thinking, segregating the slightly smarter apes likewise, and will lead to the final world war if not remedied very soon. When David Ben-Gurion declared victory and the establishment of Israel in 1949, then U.S. President Harry S. Truman was advised by the State Department and others against recognizing it, but in his words, "I'm sorry, gentlemen, but I have to answer to hundreds of thousands who are anxious for the success of Zionism. I do not have hundreds of thousands of Arabs among my constituents." Muslim immigration into European countries and the USA, the inevitable disaster that Zionism was bound to be as predicted by the early anti-Zionist/assimilationists/King Crane/etc., and easily verified by over a century of monumental suffering/wars/tensions/polarization around the region with no sign of ending, are finally turning public opinion around. Massive intellectual errors that fool entire populations are part of humanity. From 1914 to 1918, countless European leaders/theologians/great minds fooled themselves into believing that it was necessary to slaughter each other across trenches in WWI for reasons today not 1 out of 100,000 remember. Millions of well-intentioned ideologues brought immense suffering upon themselves via socialism/communism, coercive competitionless monopoly planning, during much of the 20th century. Bright people, with the best of intentions, ignorantly coercing each other via government has been the source of all of these problems, and overcoming such ignorance is the key to solving them, including our Zionist and ultimately Jew/Gentile issues. This conflict should be seen as an opportunity to spread an understanding of free markets and how freedom is the key to socio-economic harmony. A simple starting point for a solution can be as follows: a single country/state with a largely non-democratic government where everyone has equal rights. The government should be minimal in the sense that it should be clearly defined in some bare-bones constitution that besides modern/obvious freedoms like freedom of press/speech/ etc., the national government should only be involved in protecting such freedoms and private property, and should clearly be forbidden from ever going into education, elderly care, any kind of socialized/monopoly/medicine/anything, etc. This is not up to democratic change and is important so that Jews will not fear a larger Muslim population eventually taking their freedom/wealth, which would definitely be the case if they were forced to pay for massive public sector welfare state bureaucracies attempting to provide equal access/funding for education, health services, elderly care, etc. that the economically ignorant though well-intentioned public always falls for. Free marketeers know that democracy is nothing more than mob rule, where 51% of the people may take away the rights of the other 49. Jefferson. It is not democracy that brings prosperity, it is the competitive knowledge discovery that arises out of private property and thus freedom. We definitely do not want what is happening in South Africa, where economic ignorance, exacerbated by ill treatment in the past, has a now minority of whites suffering increasingly and an accelerated wrecking of the economy. Jews/Muslims/Christians/everyone will have the freedom to pool their wealth to create their own privately funded educational systems/charities and be free to discriminate if they so wish based on religion, sex, whatever their customs or free individuals agree upon. Palestinians who were expelled during various wars and their descendants will have the right to go back to the lands they were expelled from, and a similar effort should be made so that Jews who were expelled from Muslim lands can also reclaim their property and rights. If the lands have since been developed, a simple starting solution to the potential conflicts and a way to provide some restitution to the Palestinians and help get this country on a rapid path to amazing prosperity is as follows: Jews keep lands and homes and buildings they currently have developed and are clearly being used for productive purposes. My guess is that this actual amount of land is probably around 35% of the land. Then we take the other 65%, and using some simple software or other means we distribute it to all Palestinians who were dispossessed, thus privatizing most of the country. So far this simple framework accomplishes the following: Jews should be pretty happy, no fear of a demographic majority that can then interfere with your freedom and/or property, no need to pay for the education of non-Jews or other Jews for that matter. The more religious Jews who have a super strong connection to the land can live, travel, buy land everywhere. No draconian uprooting or potentially economically devastating disruptions. Palestinians regain their freedom and land. Since this minimal state will have minimal/no taxes or regulations, it will quickly blossom in prosperity. The land will quickly increase in value, providing much deserved compensation for the Palestinians. The entire country will skyrocket in socio-economic prosperity and serve as an example/beacon of progress. Loudly clamoring for a solution along these lines brings us free marketeers tremendous advantages. We will be the only ones actually making noise and bringing attention to a rather simple and thus easy to spread viral plan. It gives us an opportunity to teach and sort of piggyback basic economics as we explain to people how prosperity will skyrocket, helping us in our more ambitious worldwide free market educational efforts, which is obviously the key to everything.